Hey Bookaholics, and welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you a dedicated series review of Era 1 of Red Rising. Red Rising is a series that currently has either 3 books and then 4 books or 7 books in it in total, depending on how you look at it. I have categorized these as 2 series within a series. So we have the original trilogy and then we have the second tetralogy. And I am today going to be talking about the original trilogy, the first 3 books that came out in this series. The original trilogy consists of Red Rising, Golden Sun, and Morning Star. In this series, we are following Darrow, who is a red, far in the future where now a lot of the planets have been terraformed. However, the Reds who work on Mars have been kept in servitude, unbeknownst to them, since they are mining for a substance known as helium-3, which they believe will help terraform the planets and therefore allow humans to evacuate the dying planet Earth. However, with these planets having been terraformed for a long time, they are left in poverty and in servitude with no real cause for the suffering that they are enduring. When Darrow's wife makes herself a martyr to spur him into action and actually becoming someone who is going to take down this society from the inside, he takes up the opportunity to join up with the Sons of Ares, who are a group of individuals who genuinely believe that the society in which they are living is wrong. This is a sci-fi, but it is pitched more as a dystopian. In this story, we are following as Darrow begins to infiltrate the Golds and then goes about tearing apart this society. It's a fascinating story because I think that it has a lot of interesting conversations around the way that meritocracies, the way that supposed societies of leaning into your birthright being more important than your actual contribution to society was handled. Before we get into my full thoughts on this series, I am going to point out that this book starts with fridging. If fridging is something that genuinely bothers you, you really should not get into this series because it's never really framed as fridging. I don't think I've ever really heard anyone talk about it in a way that is fridging, aside from people reading the synopsis like it's really blasé, and I'm like, that's fridging. So just because this protagonist's wife sets herself up in a way that would make her a martyr, it's still a woman dying to push forth a man's story. So you do need to bear that in mind. Also bear in mind that both the protagonist and his wife at this point are teenagers. So it's fridging and it's a young woman dying for it. So please bear that in mind when you are picking up this book. That being said, I actually had a good time with these books. Once I got past the fridging, which is something that bothers me, I enjoyed the series. This first book has a Hunger Games vibe to it. I've heard that comp before and it is actually accurate. A lot of the time when there are comps, I'm just like, is it though? It's actually accurate in this one. The way that Darrow goes about infiltrating the Golds is by joining in these trials that are to enter into this prestigious school. The school has a culling system, which means that all of the students that are entered have to then fight an opponent to be able to proceed through the academy, which means that 50% of all of entrants end up being culled. This is supposedly held in place so that the Golds learn how to survive. There is the belief that Gold children have had privilege for so long that they don't know how to fight for it, they don't know how to keep it. And it's the fear that if they don't learn, they won't then be able to keep their position of power in this pyramid of society. So we do have the Hunger Games, the element. We also then have them needing to survive in groups to continue to pass through this academy. One of the things that I did really appreciate in this story is the discussions around working together, around the violence that comes with war. So for example, one of the things that was discussed was the way that sexual violence is used within war. And that is something that I did really appreciate because after having the fridging, the fact that then Pierce Brown decided to discuss the likes of rape and sexual assault within war and within places that condone violence was really important. I think that Another thing that was discussed in here that I really did appreciate is the way that Darrow is acing his way through this school because he knows how to oppress because he has been oppressed. There were lots of discussions, obviously, throughout the entire series around the way that this society works, the way the hierarchies work, and the different mentalities that different people will have, the different ways that people will treat you based on who they think you are versus who you actually are, and the way that people who have been part of the privileged end of society have no need for change, even if it's only benefiting them to a certain degree. Even if it's once you fall, you'll never get back up to where you were. They've never fallen, so they don't understand. And there are so many things that I think were an interesting conversation in here. I think that some of the conversations were heavy-handed. I think that some of them lacked a little bit of nuance in regards to marginalized people, in regards to women, in regards to, for example, as far as I'm aware, in this first book there is 0% LGBT representation. There are so many conversations that need to be had that just weren't. And I appreciate not everything can be a conversation within a book like this, and it's an older book as well, but it does mean that when we're talking about the oppressed and we're still talking about a white man, it makes it a little bit okay. But I do think that it's a very good book. I do think that it has really good conversations around the working classes, around the need to rise up, and around the way that sometimes people act like being oppressed is a choice. When you are starving and your loved ones are starving, you don't have it in you to rise up. And that is why in a lot of dystopians we end up having young people who do not have responsibilities to families to keep them alive. I think that there was an interesting conversation here of, because Darrow's wife was dead, he no longer had a responsibility to anyone, and therefore it put him in a position to rise up. They were marrying off the Reds at a young age, probably for that exact reason, so they would start reproducing, but also so that then they had dependents. And I really appreciated it for the most part in that regard. The second book was a fascinating one because it emphasized humanizing your oppressor, which is something that happens. You spend time with your oppressors, you see they are people, you see that they care about their loved ones, you see that they are trying what seems like their best, and within their society they are actually doing really well. It just so happens that their best hurts your people. And there was an interesting conversation here around rising up. Yes, it's going to hurt the lower classes, and the idea is that it hurts the upper classes, but there are going to be innocents on both sides that are going to get hurt by this, and the humanizing of your enemy can be really dangerous, but also is very necessary. So I really did appreciate some of the things that went on in here, some of the discussions that were had in regards to how society views itself from the different levels. And yeah, we had some characters in here that potentially learn about Darrow and that he is a Red, and their different responses to that, their different reactions to that, and the fallout of that as well. While I don't think that these books are particularly not predictable, I definitely could predict the majority of the reveals. That's not the purpose of reading them, and I still had an enjoyable time with the installments. The last one is where it got particularly brutal, especially in regards to, for example, starting a lower classes rebellion and then the sacrifices that need to be made, the deaths that you are willing to have on your hands, the decisions that you as a leader would have to make so that the benefit outweighs the current situation. You need there to be a better future, even if the present is really bleak. The way that you go about that sometimes is making sacrifices that are absolutely unbelievable. The things that you will let happen to the people you are supposed to be protecting so that you can protect future generations. And I think it was a really important conversation, and I don't think that at any point it was really telling you that Darrow's in the right or in the wrong. It's just, this is how this ends up working, and I really did appreciate that. So while I think that some of the conversations lacked nuance in terms of representation and the way that oppression works, I think that if you took that aside and literally just focused on the fact that you do have a huge discussion around class divide and about uprisings and how messy they are, while at the same time how necessary they are, I think that was a really good message to put out. So for the most part, they're not a series that I particularly love. They're not like new favorites or anything, but I think they had some interesting conversations. I think the world building was fascinating. I really, really liked the characters. I think that they were really nuanced and felt really well rounded, and they definitely felt like people. Even some side characters characters. The relationships that Darrow forms with some of these characters as well, especially those who he knows are going to eventually become his opposition, was also fascinating. And like I said, the humanizing of your enemy, of the class that you need to bring down, was absolutely fascinating. So I really liked this story, and I think that it has merit. I just think that it also has flaws. So I'll leave you with that it's a flawed good series. And let me know if you've read the series and your thoughts on it. Let me know if, based on my liking of this series, if there is another series that you would recommend or another book that you would recommend. That is all from me for today. So thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye!